Awesome. So again, our focus today is, throughout our career, we've personally placed thousands of individuals. We've helped support teams, probably combined over 150 teams across a variety of industries and disciplines. And so we've kind of boiled it down to our 15 favorite tips around being a top contributor, really being an influencer, a great performer on site. And those fall into kind of 6 major buckets. And these aren't all inclusive, just as a heads up, but from our experience, these are the 6 areas that you can continuously develop, fine tune to take your contributions and your career to the next level. So we'll go into these in more depth, but first and foremost, really understanding kind of the purpose factor, that why component, really understanding why it is, what you do, how you do it, why you do it to serve your organization, to serve your customers is huge. Number 2, always having that growth mindset. It wouldn't be a performance-related presentation if we didn't drop growth mindset in there, but just always growing, always focusing on how you can be kind of the best version of your professional self. Communication, we're going to talk a good about that spans across multiple of the top 15 tips, especially in kind of our new normal, the world we live in today. Ownership is absolutely critical to strong performance, as is attitude. Attitude can really make or break your career and the progression of your career. And then last but not least, just always taking a proactive approach, throughout all of the tips that we're going to talk about. So as I mentioned, we decided to gamify it a little bit. I know a lot of us live on video meetings and just calls after calls. So Cate and I debated whether or not we were going to keep these in here, but who isn't a fan of some Wheel of Fortune? So we're going to do some fill in the blanks that align with some of our key strategies. So find that chat box. And Cate, let's go to the next slide and just drop what you think it is. But what's our very first performance tip? Who's got it? Just drop it in the chat box. And I'll be keeping a pulse on that.
I'm waiting.
The anticipation. And we'll give it 10 seconds.
Somebody might be in the Q&A.
Oh, I see that. Okay, so some great comments coming through. Oh, I can't find the chat, LOL. Okay, there we go. Understand the big picture. Perfect. Yep. So let's jump into that. Cate's going to dive into that one.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, I think this is so important. And I was in Richmond last month for an emerging leaders team meeting, and we had a conversation about this, really about ensuring that all of the folks that work for us and our teams understand that roadmap, that vision, the why behind what we do. And if those of you aren't familiar with this TED Talk by Simon Sinek, I would highly recommend watching it, How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And really his whole concept behind this is, people understand the responsibilities they have, what they do, but truly only a few truly understand why they do it. And, something we've heard from a lot of managers, directors, hiring managers that we've worked with over the years are the folks on their team that are those top performers that really, contribute the most to their team, get the why behind everything that they do. And yes, as leaders, it's important for us to explain that, but this is great if you are a new employee or if you've just recently joined a new team. This is a great step to kind of find out, hey, how do I fit in? How does the project that I'm working on roll up to a larger program or a larger portfolio? How does that fit into some of the overall strategic objectives of the organization? How does this fit into what my industry is trying to do as a whole? So really having that mindset and really understanding the why behind what you do, not just your day-to-day task and your responsibility, but really understanding how it fits in the big picture is so important. And if you're somebody that does understand that, spread that knowledge and that wealth throughout your team. When teams are more bought in, when they have this big picture, that macro mentality, understanding what their priorities are and again, how they fit in. So I think this is so important. It's a very simple concept, but it's one of those things that we see a lot of people miss. They're so focused on the micro day-to-day responsibilities of their role. So just make sure, again, if you're starting out in a new role, you're joining a new organization, kind of follow that chain up on where you fit in, and then figure out what are your priorities and what are the things that are expected of you over the short term and the long term, because that can really help frame that picture for you.
Awesome. And a couple of things I want to say about that, Cate. We've had these conversations, leadership calls lately. People want more fulfillment. They want to see the impact that they're making. One of our executive vice presidents, his number one concern with his people right now is just that feeling of isolation. So all those things can, help be alleviated a little bit if you master how to do this and how to really explain the why behind every request, every initiative, and then communicate the why in action, the impact of a deliverable well done or a project well launched. And one other thing I want to tie in here is Cate and I have been getting a lot of requests lately around not just the Great Resignation and the Great Reimagination, but just what can we be doing, recognizing the talent market is very sparse and there's a lot of demand for a limited supply of talented individuals. But if you aren't already, build this into your interview process. We see that missing. I would say, I wish I had an accurate statistic here, and Cate, jump in, but I would say at least 90% of the job descriptions of the positions that I've seen in the last month, they're missing this very critical component. So even communicating the projects, the initiatives, and the greater impact, the business problems, the pain points in your job descriptions and interview process, and then once you onboard somebody, that can be critical to your attracting talent, your recruitment strategy, your onboarding strategy, your retention strategy.
Yeah, I love that. I call it the impact factor. And so many job descriptions that I see, to Erica's point, it's just the day-to-day responsibilities, the requirements. It really doesn't get into, okay, well, what is the greater impact of this role? What is the project? And again, there are some things that are proprietary that you cannot share in a job description, but a lot of times there are ways to reword things or at least give some insight into what the overall initiative is.
Yeah. Awesome. So, one of our favorite tips in, something that we believe should be in every job description and responsibilities matrix for leaders as well as individual contributors is around the relationship building component. At the end of the day, we all have stakeholders, we all have customers we're supporting, and we need to have some form of a relationship with them in order to, one, best support them, but also get what we need from them. I'll never forget, as part of my MBA program, I took a project management course, which was an elective, and I feel very firmly that should have been a requirement of that program. And after we did, the section on the importance of stakeholder management and stakeholder relationships, I had just transitioned to a new job where I was supporting people across the company that I hadn't met in person, and they were all in different roles and capacities. And one of the things that I found, and I communicated to my boss at the time, and this was maybe 10 years ago, or maybe beyond that, was I'm not getting the response I need. I'm not getting the buy-in I need from these other individuals that I'm now relying on to be successful with my own initiatives and programs. And so I pitched to him at the time, because most people were in person in Richmond, I'd say 80%, hey, send me to Richmond. What's your agenda, Erica? My main agenda is to meet all of my stakeholders and actually understand who they are. What do you do for Apex? What are your pain points? And just establish a personal relationship. Hear about, just their journey and where they started and where they are now and how they got there at Apex. But that was my goal. And then I noticed when I got back, it did wonders for the progress I needed to make. So I would encourage you, I know that looks very different in our worlds now, but have you ever scheduled a meeting where the purpose and the whole agenda was purely to get to know the key people that you were going to be working with? however your schedules aligns, whatever format. But that is so helpful. You've got to invest in building the relationships, because without that trust, without that connection, without that mutual understanding of what you need, and going back to the why you need it and why it's going to help propel your initiatives and the company forward, it's going to be really hard to be a strong performer. Anything you'd say about this one, especially being on a remote team for so long, Cate?
Yes, I would say, I think about this from maybe a little bit of a different perspective, but when you're onboarding folks and you have those new team members, I personally find it very important, and something we do with our team is that part of our onboarding checklist is that they meet with each individual on our team. And again, if you have a team that's 200, this isn't going to be possible. There's 16 of us, but over their 3-week onboarding period, they meet with each individual on the team. And, a lot of us don't overlap in our day-to-day responsibilities and who we interact with, but I think it's really important that they understand who works on the team, what exactly they do, what are our specialties, because each of us have things that we focus on and are really good at. And then who can they lean on if they do have a question about a specific area. So that's something that's been really important for us. We've onboarded now 4 people since we've been, everybody's been fully remote. And that's really helped, and I think, again, it goes back to that whole concept of building a sense of community, especially for us that are remote and plan to be remote for the foreseeable future. It's hard to have those investments, those social relationships, and those investments like we did when we were in person. So this is a nice way to do that and really develop, those relationships with folks that we don't normally work with.
Yeah. And, it's interesting, that whole, it's not what you know, but who you know. And if you know people better, that can certainly set you up and give you an advantage for taking a lead on new initiatives, just promotions, when you're embarking upon a job search. So I dropped in a link to the chat. We've built out a checklist. We compiled, some 10 strategies from our internal managers who have the highest employee engagement and highest employee retention. So this comes directly from leaders across Apex, and some really good ideas. I actually incorporated 2 of those into my own onboarding process for new team members.
Yeah, and Erica alluded to this in the last, I think everybody's heard the phrase, the Great Resignation, and that onboarding period, it is so critical for retention. So this is something, if you find your team, your organization really struggling with that retention piece, I really urge you to take a look and reflect on your onboarding process, because people really make the decision of whether they're going to leave or stay within that 60 to 90 day window, which I think is shocking to a lot of people, but that's the reality of the job market right now.
Yeah. And as you guys are hearing ideas that you like, not everyone's in a leadership capacity, but we're all leaders. And if you want to, again, strengthen your career, be that kind of go-to person on your team and your group at your company, identify opportunities and make, be that change you want to see on your team and in your group, and make suggestions. Because people want to hear them. So I wanted to throw that piece in there too.
Great. All right, so let's move on. So I love this one because I think sometimes people forget that they were hired for a reason and that they got a promotion for a reason, or whatever the situation is. Like, you have a job for a reason. So you were clearly showed competence, for your trade or for your skill, for your profession. In the first place. And I think sometimes we forget that. We maybe have a little bit of imposter syndrome or whatever gets in the way. But one of the things that Eric and I talk about when we're doing interviewing workshops is asking the interviewer, what am I expected to accomplish over the next 3 to 6 and 12 months? And from an interview perspective, that shows that you're thinking about the long term. But I think this is a really great question to ask if you are somebody that has, again, recently joined your organization, recently moved to a new team, maybe you're taking on a new project or initiative, kind of figure out what are those deliverables, what are those key milestones coming up, that what is expected of me. I think it goes a long way for showing your overall competence as an employee. So the other side of this that's really important that a lot of times people forget is managers and employees, none of us are mind readers, right? So if you aren't getting what you need to be successful, you need to make sure that you're bubbling that up to the appropriate person, whether that's your leader, whether that's your training and development team, but making sure that you know what you need to accomplish in the next XYZ timeframe. Do you have the tools, the resources, etc., to do so? And if not, work backwards and figure out what you need. And that's one of those things that goes back to that competence piece. I think any hiring manager, any director, even internal folks at Apex will say, I love it when people come in, they immediately show that they have confidence in their skill set. And if they don't, they reach out, they ask for help, they get what they need, and then they go on their merry way. So that's one of those things that I really urge people to do, especially if you're somebody that's recently joined an organization or again moved to a new team. What is it that is being expected of you in the foreseeable future? And then what do you need to be successful? If there's any gaps there, again, communicating that to make sure that you can be the competent employee that they hired you to be. Anything else on this, Erica?
Oh, it's interesting. So one of the programs I run is our survey program. And, we get hundreds and hundreds of survey responses a month from our contractors and our consultants. Again, a huge population of project managers, anyone in kind of like the PMO space. And it's crazy the amount of comments I read, like, I don't have access, I don't have equipment, I don't have training, I don't have guidance, I really need feedback. And I just think about, there's one of the disconnects that we see with our clients, sometimes internally we see this too, is, managers are like asking, what do you need? Or they just assume that you're going to come to them, especially being virtual, it's hard. But again, to Cate's point, they aren't mind readers. And yes, this can be challenging to say, hey, I need guidance or I need training on this new tool we're using. I need to identify some folks internally and I need to make time for myself. Do you have recommendations? Can you pay for me to get training with this tool? And just know that people want that. People feel the amount of guilt that I feel like people feel when asking is pretty excessive a lot of the time. And just remove that guilt and remove just anything else that might be getting in the way of saying and speaking up and taking that initiative to say, here's what I need to do my job better. Because odds are, to be a top performer, there's something that you need. So don't be afraid to, one, identify that and two, communicate it.
Perfect.
All right, so we've got our next game.
Ooh,
so
yeah.
on that Q&A box.
Next. I love the games.
Nice little break, right?
Yeah.
I got the Q&A box open.
I do too. I'm ready for it.
Give it like 10 more seconds. What do you guys think?
We got it, Bill.
Nice.
Perfect.
Oh, I didn't scroll down. Perfect. Melissa, I love it. This is a big one. It's funny because if you had asked me, prior to entering the professional world, if people said some version of, that's not in my job description, I would have laughed, right? Like in what world, if you have time, right? If your bandwidth is completely exceeded, then figuring out how to frame that and saying, not right now. But just like if you have the opportunity and the bandwidth, being like, oh, I'm not going to do that task. It's not in my bandwidth, just not being helpful. I did not realize just how often that actually occurs. And we've seen that time and again. And I spent 6 years in the recruiting chair. And I feel like, with the folks that were let go or fired, oftentimes this is one of the contributors to that. And so this is just something that, we need to be mindful of. How are we being supportive to our peers, to our clients, to our managers? How are we helping? And one of the, things I think about, and it was kind of an aha moment for me, the second bullet point, there's 3 ways to be helpful. And, one is just kind of reacting, like your manager might say, or a team member might say, hey, I'm going out on PTO. Can somebody run my daily Scrum meetings for me. And you're like, oh yeah, I can help with that. So reacting to their request for help. Second is just being proactive, saying, hey, Cate, you're going out on vacation. What can I help with? And then the third, which is actually a game changer, from what I've seen, especially, is, hey, Cate, you're going out on PTO. I know you run the daily Scrum meetings. Can I take those off your plate? Hey, I know you do this training for onboarding. I'd love to get more involved in training. That's an area that I've really focused on. Can I take that off your plate, or can I help you while you're out? So that third way to be helpful is being proactive with it and providing actual suggestions. I also think back to how can you propel and get, from point A to point B. I actually just had a conversation with somebody yesterday who's trying to move from more of an administrative function to more of a training program function. And you've got to start doing the tasks that you want to eventually do if you have the opportunity. So take the time, if you want to move into a Scrum Master role, start to find ways to add some of those tasks to your plate, while also, providing value add support and saving time for the people around you. So again, just kind of think about, am I being truly helpful now? And what are ways I could be more proactively helpful while also expanding on the skills that I want to develop and eventually have on my plate? This is kind of cut and dry, Cate. Anything you'd say here?
Yeah, I would just say, I think this is one of those things that really was a game changer in my career, was trying to always be a couple steps ahead of my leader. And in the sense of, what are the things that they dislike doing that I could potentially take off their plate or assist with? And then just doing things for them so that they wouldn't have to think about it. And I know my boss has said that to me a few times, like, I really appreciate that about you. I know that I know that you're going to handle it, like, no matter what. I don't even have to worry about it. And I think that's kind of not for everything, right? But for certain things, I think that's the mindset and the thing that you want to achieve, just so they know they have that implicit trust in you and support in you, that if something happened to them, right? And I think that's what my boss always says, like, if something happened to me and I fell off the face of the earth, like, I knew that you guys would be able to step in and help. So I think that's really, really important. All right, so next, responsive. Oh gosh, well, Erica knows I can go on a deep tangent on responsiveness, because this is a hot button topic for me. But Stacey Henke has an interesting article about this. So, I would definitely recommend to check that out. Basically, what does your response time say about you? And, if you avoid responding or take more than 2 days to do so, what she says is that you communicate a lack of respect and are possibly viewed as unorganized with questionable work ethics, which, again, none of us want to get to the point of that. So I think the thing about responsiveness, we're all busy. I mean, I don't know anybody that doesn't have a bajillion emails. I'm sure when we all get off of this, we're going to have a ton of emails. And I think there are things that are, of course, higher priority than others. So, all that I'm saying about responsiveness is that it's more important to say, hey, I got your email, I recognize it, I am not going to have time to get back to this until tomorrow, Thursday, whatever the day is, but acknowledging that you received that and that you will follow up if you are not able to follow up in a timely manner, versus just ignoring it. I think all of us probably work with coworkers who truly never respond to emails. And it always makes me wonder, well, who are they responding to if they're not responding to anybody? So I think it's one of those things, again, find a system that works for you. I have a colleague who, she runs one of our largest solution areas at our organization, and she gets just hounded by folks all day long. So she truly has 2 time frames, a morning and a late afternoon time frame, that she goes through her emails and responds to everybody. And that is what she's found works best for her. It's kind of that time box approach. For other people, they like responding in real time and clearing their inbox. All I'm saying here is that you have to have some type of strategy. And again, are there things that you can do and incorporate to make it more efficient and help with time management? But, I think don't ever be that person that just doesn't respond, is never available, doesn't show up to calls. Like, that's really what's going to reflect poorly on you.
Awesome. We have a question that came in, Cate, if you want
Yeah.
to pause and do this one. So being helpful and supportive is in itself a full-time job as a manager with direct reports. Agreed. Is there other leadership type programs that you plug people into to help them become more aware of this skill? What's
Well, yeah, I mean, I
what's
would
your
think
reaction to that?
so. I have two things. Is there an opportunity for them to shadow you? And maybe it's one day a week, one day a month, so they get the idea of some of the things that you're doing and what you're responsible for. Um, and then, do you know on your team through one-on-ones and conversations, like who's interested in potentially taking on more of a leadership responsibility? Because not everybody is, and that's okay. You have your workers, you have your folks that want to be leaders. There's people across the spectrum, and we need them all on our teams. But are there folks that want to take on additional responsibilities? And then could you set up some type of mentorship program with them if possible? Those are the two things that come to mind right away that, aren't some fancy program that you could do organically.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. A lot of people aren't going to want to take too much on their plate. And, you know, that's okay because if you see them as a long-time employee in that particular role and they've mastered, that craft or they're providing value in that craft, you don't need everybody to have this level of leadership. So it's seeking out what they want. And, one-on-ones is a great opportunity for doing that. What do you want to be doing? What do you like about your job? What are, the tasks you'd want to be doing more of? What 3 to 5 years from now, leadership track, is that something that you're interested in? So kind of gauging that on the front end and then giving them specific examples, showing them, right? So I love the shadowing, they shadow you, giving them something to own, a task that they could then provide help in, and then giving that real-time validation feedback after the fact. So I hope that helps. If not, just drop, a follow-up build to that in the Q&A. So moving on to number 6, it's all about feedback. This is one I struggled with early on. And again, this can make or break. This goes hand in hand with attitude. This can make or break your career. So the first kind of thing here is you've got to have the mentality that getting feedback, constructive feedback, suggestions on your performance, look at that as you're being awarded an opportunity to improve, to be a better version of yourself. Do your best not to look at it through a negative lens, look at it through a positive, like this person is trying to help me and they see something in me and they're helping me be better. So that is kind of the first thing. And again, I struggled with this. It took me probably about my first 2 years to get on board with that mentality because, like a lot of people, when I got negative feedback early on, my first impulse was, I'm going to get fired, which was not the case. But again, I had the luxury of the pleasure of having a manager that was forthright and was honest and had those difficult conversations with me, which is huge. Two, definitely have some sort of feedback process, so we've got kind of this formula at the top, truly listening, being fully engaged, taking notes, so doing something to show that you're engaged and you're truly listening, acknowledging the feedback, and again, acknowledge it with some sort of gratitude. It is hard for people to deliver feedback. So recognizing that, hopefully that in of itself makes it a little bit easier, but recognizing that, say, thank you for giving me this feedback and awarding me the opportunity to make an improvement in this particular area. And then apply, seek feedback, even a month later if they don't follow up with you. And that goes back to like asking for what you need and soliciting input. Make sure you're doing that. So anything else? I mean, feedback, this is a tough one. I don't know if you struggled with this, Cate. I mean, you just had to deliver, some pretty constructive feedback too, but anything else you would add to this?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that, as humans, we tend to be a little defensive, especially when folks are, delivering constructive feedback to us. And, hopefully you have a manager that does it just like that in a constructive way. I think the important thing with feedback is that hopefully you're getting it real time. I'm always disappointed when I hear the only time I get feedback is during my performance review cycle. I think that's unfortunate. Now, if you are somebody that, is in that situation and you don't get feedback on a regular cycle, I would ask for it. I'd really like to have an informal performance review and just hear how I'm doing. And, if you have a big deliverable or a milestone, that's a great way to, a great opportunity to ask for that outside of the normal performance review cycle. But, I think Erica's point's really good. It's like you always have to take it with the idea of, this is going to help me as a person, as a professional. And yes, my first inclination is to be defensive, but really, take some time to let it soak in. Maybe that's a couple days, maybe that's a week, right? I mean, some of us need to internalize things for a little while, and that's totally fine. But then what are you going to do with that? And that kind of leads into our next topic, but it's like taking that feedback and then actually taking action on it.
Yeah. And the one other thing that popped into my head there, one of the job seeker studies that really resonated with me and has stuck with me for many years now is a LinkedIn survey found that a candidate who is declined from an off and didn't receive an offer is 4 times more likely to consider an opportunity with your company in the future if they receive feedback on why, if they receive like feedback on, again, what could make me better. And the way I'm going to tie this back to this is because it can actually strengthen your relationship and show that you're an investment. It's all how you deliver it and pick your battles, right? So you don't want to get into attack mode on a list of 10 things, but it can actually strengthen your relationship if you ask for hard feedback. Again, if you're, in that contributor role, and as a leader, if you deliver constructive feedback and opportunities for growth to your people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think Erica can probably attest to this too. Over the years when we were recruiting and working with candidates, I know I had to deliver some very tough feedback to candidates about their interview. And, again, you always want to keep things positive. But to Erica's point, I had a few situations where the candidates were like, you know what, nobody has ever taken the opportunity to tell me that. I had no idea. And it really helped them moving forward. And ultimately, they were able to find a job, which is great. But, again, I think it's one of those things, like a lot of times people just never get that. And that's really, again, unfortunate. So definitely make sure you're giving that feedback. All right, so training and development is next, and I think this leads really nice into this topic. So, once you do get any feedback, good or bad, or constructive, right? What are you going to do to take that forward? And Erica really mentioned this in the beginning of our presentation, but it's that idea about a growth mindset. And all top performers that I know, you think about like the best athletes, the best in their field, everybody, they're always striving to be better. And that's the mindset that you really want to have. So what are those target things that what are those things that your reach goals, and what are the things that you can do now that will have immediate impact? We're big fans of SWOT analysis. If you don't know what that is, strength, weakness, opportunities, threats, to kind of figure out, hey, what am I really good at? What can I improve? And then what is my plan once I've done that to propel myself forward? I know for me personally, I have got I took 3 certifications over the last 4 years, not required at all. It was something that was important to me to have a deeper knowledge of my field and improve my craft. Again, it might not be a certification for you. It might be something different. It might be learning a new tool. It might be shadowing somebody at work. I know another really great example is my team write SQL queries in SSMS for our organization, and we develop these SQL reports. None of us were doing this 2 years ago. Truly, nobody on the team was. It's a skill that we've all developed. We have a couple folks on our team that lead it and really help kind of mentor everybody and get them trained on it. But now we're all able to do this specific skill set for the organization, which is really cool. So, it's one of those things when you're thinking about your development, who on my team has skills that I'm envious of, or I really want to. Who in my organization, who else do I know potentially outside my organization that has something I could learn from? And are there things that I could take from outside here and bring to my organization to help improve the competency of my team as a whole? So, I like to look at it from an individual view, but then also from like a team view, and how can we elevate ourselves together? So, this is one of those things that, again, I think training and development is so important. You have to dedicate time to it. It's like working out. You might not want to do it, but you got to do it. And, it might be 1 hour every 2 weeks, 2 hours a month. I mean, whatever your cadence is, I think it's just like you've got to commit to doing something. It could be reading a professional development book. Again, it could be watching YouTube tutorials, taking something like this. There's so many opportunities out there for free training and development. Just what are the skills that you want to achieve? Where are you trying to go with your career? Where are you trying to propel yourself at your current organization? And then wrapping that together and putting a plan together for a short-term and long-term of how to achieve that.
Love it. The only thing I'd add to this is in some of these tips, you're probably noticing you can combine together. And so I would, think about what does your organization offer? And odds are your company probably offers at least one thing that you aren't aware of. Cate and I, at one point, we did kind of an audit with our training and development director to be like, can you break down every program that we offer, every resource our employees have access to? And I learned of at least 2 programs, and I am heavily invested in training and development. And that was a surprise. So one, just kind of taking the 5 minutes to peruse your company intranet, or if you have access to somebody in your training and development team, hey, what's the most underutilized training offering we have? And we've got some managers on here. Take the time to communicate this. Again, at all aspects, interviewing that can make your company more attractive during the onboarding, in team meetings, and have people who's utilized our tuition reimbursement, who's utilized, certification support, conferences, what conferences are people going to? So, taking the time to, one, kind of discover that, and 2, what can you do to make training collaborative? And again, combine it with number 2, social investment, because from my experience, some of the best team building and team bonding is when people are learning and growing together. All right, here's our third game. I've got a pulse on the Q&A. What do you guys think? And this is for our next big tip, number 8. Yes.
Bill again.
Bill, have you been on Wheel of Fortune yet? Maybe you should go. Awesome. So I know we said it earlier, but again, attitude is absolutely everything. It can make or break your career. It can make or break the performance of your team. And this one will always stick with me as well, because as a new manager, I've managed people for about 10 years now. And I gave somebody early on 6 chances, and that was probably, about 3 to 4 too many. And I'll never forget my A player, my team lead at the time, that next week, she told me, oh, it's like a black cloud's been lifted, Erica. And I thought to myself, shame on me, right, as a leader for allowing that to happen. But this is something like, one, just being, again, aware of it. And it's something that you can influence, and it's in yourself you can influence it within your team. And as an aspiring leader who wants, your performance and the performance of your team, because a lot of the time, again, those go hand in hand. So as a top performer, you should always be thinking about doing kind of a pulse check on your team culture and giving suggestions to leadership on what you could do to make a positive impact. And so this is a big one. We've got a couple book recommendations. One of my favorite leaders at Apex, he has his new employees, all of them, he gives them a copy of the Energy Bus when they start, and he has a conversation that's somehow along the lines of like, there are up and downs. Being in our world is like being on a roller coaster. And we have to be aware of our attitude and what we're displaying, and it is going to get tricky. But keep these strategies in mind, and when you need to have a conversation about this stuff, when you're feeling that toll, let's talk. But so that's a good suggestion for any leaders, or something you could suggest. That mindset is everything, and you can train yourself on these. I know Cate and one of our favorite books and just leadership authors is Sean Aker. He's kind of the founder of happiness and positive psychology. He leads that division at Harvard. So I absolutely loved his Happiness Advantage book. We actually did that as a virtual book club with my team when COVID first hit. And so you can combine this with, number 7 and number 8. You can even combine these, and number 2, 7, and 8, you can all knock together. That was a really, really good exercise. But one of the big takeaways from his TED Talk and his book is that our goal as a team, contributor, as a leader, is to make sure we have a ratio of at least 6 positive comments to 1 constructive or negative comment. That's kind of that magic number where teams perform at their best. Cate, anything, again, I know we could talk about this one all day, but make it until you change it, like adjust your attitude. Anything else you would say here?
No, I just think attitude is everything. And listen, it's hard. I mean, some days the world's tearing us down. So, if you need to step away for a little bit to get your mind right, go for a walk, whatever, meditate, whatever it is, I think that's really important. And a lot of times we hope that our leaders see if there is somebody that is bringing the culture down or having a positive attitude, but sometimes they truly don't know. So, as an employee, that's one of those things you have to bubble up. Again, it can be a very difficult conversation, but it is one of those things that, like, if you have somebody on your team who is constantly making negative comments or constantly bringing things down, I would recommend, if there's somebody that you work closely with, taking them aside and telling them, and again, real time is always better for these things, versus letting it bubble up and bubble over. But letting them know, like, hey, I don't know if you noticed what you said and what people's reaction to that was, but this is how that was taken, or that's how that email was perceived. Or, I've noticed lately that you've been saying these things. Is everything okay with you? And kind of flipping it that way, right? And again, don't make it confrontational. Really, like, I'm concerned about you. I've noticed this lately. And if that doesn't work, then yes, you may need to escalate that up the chain. But I always try to handle things in my realm first if I can, before going to leadership. Again, unless it's a very extreme situation.
Yeah. So that 6-to-1 ratio is really hard. Agreed.
And that's for the highest performing teams. Sean talks a lot. Majority of teams are 3-to-1 ratio.
Yeah. So yeah, good teams 3-to-1, but highest performing 6-to-1. But the question, suggestions on how to create that into a habit without having to put so much think time into finding those positive aspects. So it's just, your goal is to minimize the just negative, really pessimistic speak. I mean, my gut reaction to that is on the front end when people hire, I love the kind of like rules of engagement and expectations and, creating an expectations contract. So that's something you could even weave into your onboarding process is, here's what you can expect from me as a leader and as a support system. Here's what I expect from you. And one of those things can be like, listen, there's going to be a lot of challenges. Our goal is to view those as opportunities and tackle those head on. And one of the things I'm big on is keeping a positive, solution-oriented culture that's not draining energy from the room. So with that in mind, I want you to come to me, and during our one-on-ones, that is where the forum, the platform where I would like to have the conversations around those things that are keeping you up at night, those pain points, those concerns that you think we can influence and have control over. That's my reaction to that. Cate, anything else?
Yeah, I love that. I think the other thing that's really easy, and I've been on teams before, I think we all have, where there's negative people or just folks that tend to just be a little bit of a Debbie Downer, right? But, a lot of times and not everybody has this self-awareness, you hope that people do, but, I've seen where people have started out one way being negative, notice that that's not really tolerated or nobody else is like that, and they've shifted their pattern. Again, not everybody has that self-awareness to do that. That's the ultimate goal. But the other thing that comes to mind is, as a team, how are you recognizing and building each other up? And, I will say, I think my team does a really good job of this, where we send each other props on a regular basis. And again, it keeps that positivity up. But it's one of those things I would say our manager, our director that we all report to, he's probably doing it 10% of the time, where the rest, the 90%, is the team members ourselves sending those props to each other. So, I think about what are those relationships with the team? Are there opportunities to get to know people a little bit better? Team building, recognition, like that kind of all comes back into this idea. And I feel like once I know people better and, once I understand what makes them tick and what they like and how they want to be recognized, as long as we're committing to that as a team, I find that our positivity is just a natural side effect of that. So, because we like each other, we like working together, we're proud of the products that our team is producing, and I think it reflects in how we are as a team. So that's one of those things that you might have to do a little self-reflection on, and just like, what are we doing as a team and as a whole to help build each other up and recognize each other.
I love that. And that reminds me of a specific strategy that you gave me, Cate, that I've implemented into, I have 3 teams that kind of are in my realm. And, and it helps having a buddy, right? Like Cate and I work in different worlds of our company, and our work doesn't overlap internally. We do a lot externally together, but we have essentially like a mini peer group where we bounce ideas off of each other and we talk about our challenges. And so one of the ideas she gave me that I implemented that's been wonderful with my team is I have them keep a brag file. So we do quarterly goals. I have a running Word document with each of my people within a Teams file chat. So it's just a working document. And, again, I set expectations like, I want you, like, you're proud of something that you do, like, I want to know. And I'm not always going to know unless you tell me. I'm not tagged on everything. I'm not like versed in your day to day. So add it to, the Word document, and then we review that in one-on-ones. We do a squad sync, once a week with one of the teams, which is fantastic. And then they call it different things. Somebody calls it a brag board. Somebody else calls it my win of the week. So whatever that is, ask your team, which this is hard, and this can help with also retention and employee satisfaction, and create that positivity as a side effect, kind of like when you do the daily gratitude challenge that literally impacts your, how your brain functions. But that is an easy exercise that I would encourage, if you aren't already, to build that in. And again, in a one-on-one, like, hey, I want to hear about these things. Like, let's, add this practice going forward. And I can't wait, to talk about it and just make sure they get in that habit. So thank you for that one, Cate, always.
Yeah, that's great. And if you're somebody, like if you do customer satisfaction surveys, stakeholder surveys, and you get good feedback on your team or teammates or whoever, make sure you're sharing that. Like that's the kind of stuff that people want, and the majority of people thrive on that. So, and it's just not given probably as much as it should be. All right, so let's talk about culture a little bit. I don't know if anybody is familiar with Susan Whelan. She wrote the book, Creating Effective Teams. Again, another recommended reading on our list here. I think we've got a lot of books in here for you, but she notes in this book, basically it takes an average new team 6 months to become truly productive, but each individual team member can have a positive influence in that and potentially decrease that cycle on less than 6 months. So, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but I know for my team, onboarding is so important. because of that. We want people to get to productivity as soon as possible, but also feel confident, right? We don't want to just throw them to the wolves and say, like, good luck, like, let us know if everything's okay. We want them to be onboarded properly, get to know everybody properly, and then kind of release them to the wild, per se. So when I think about this, what are we doing to help ourselves, to help our new team members get acclimated from a culture standpoint? Now more than ever, I mean, truly every call that I am on with a director, when we're talking about positions on their team or upcoming opportunities to grow their team by a lot, culture comes up every single time. I mean, I truly have not had a call where this has not happened. And I think it's one thing to talk about your culture and how great your culture is. It's another thing to actually have a great culture and really believe and live your culture. But it's one of those things like, are you a culture contributor? What are you doing to help new people get onboarded, to show appreciation, to show recognition? Are you solution oriented? These are the things that people look for when they're thinking about a strong culture fit. It's not always communication and stakeholder engagement style. Yes, that's important. A lot of times it is like, are you generally a nice person? Are you optimistic? Are you willing to help? Are you solution oriented? Like, those are the things that hiring managers look for and really want as they take their teams to the next level. And we talk a lot about like the glue person on the team. I think probably everybody's heard that concept, but it's really that person that holds the team together, is the cheerleader, and if your team doesn't have one of those, is there an opportunity for you to be that person? You might not be. From a personality standpoint, we all have, some of us are more introverted, more extroverted, totally get that. But are there little things that you could be doing to help glue your team together if you're not comfortable being that cheerleader? And again, a lot of that goes to acclimating new team members, making sure that people feel supported, that people feel excited, that everybody's kind of rowing the same way and in the same direction. Anything you want to add here, Erica?
No, I think we're good. Again, these kind of go hand in hand.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I'd love for everyone to find that Q&A box again. And, when you think of, there's so much that goes into communication, right? But when you think of an extremely strong, let's say virtual communicator, since that's, again, the world that most of us are living in professionally these days, but what comes to mind? What traits stand out? And just enter, your first reaction. What stands out in somebody who is a very strong virtual communicator? Just drop some stuff into the Q&A box.
Love that.
Love it. Empathetic. It's a big one. So some of the things that pop into my head, and then Cate, if you want to chime in, someone who's engaged, truly engaged, someone who listens, someone who's reactive. And this is something that I've seen, in the last 2 years, kind of a dip a little bit, and maybe that's because of a lack of engagement or just feeling overwhelmed, but just reacting to what people are saying and asking follow-up questions or building upon it. But just that reactivity in response to truly listening and being truly engaged. Someone who's responsive, which Cate hit on, clear. Someone who has a very specific call to action is a big one. Someone who's concise, who's positive, who's solution oriented, and someone who communicates that purpose, that why. So those are kind of the traits that pop into my head, and just who practices, walks the walk, right? They don't just talk the talk, they actually execute and follow through. Anything else that popped into your head about what makes a truly effective communicator?
Yeah, I think that the big ones are sincere, good listener, like you said, and then trustworthy. I think that's so important because, I think about my boss and, we have some very, very difficult conversations over the years, but I implicitly trust him. Like, I know that he is working on my behalf to, support me, and help escalate things that need to be escalated. And, I know that the conversations that we have are having confidence. I know that they're not going to be bubbled up to anybody else, right? Unless there's a requirement to do so. And I think that's really important. When you're talking to somebody and when you're communicating with them, especially in a virtual environment, you have to have some of that trustworthiness there.
Yeah. So on the side, here's some of the concerns we hear the most frequently around communicators. And the other thing I'd say, communication is a topic that when you're soliciting feedback might be a good one to add to your list to solicit feedback around. How can I be a better communicator, right? And I did ask my boss that one time many years ago when Cate and I did share a boss circa like 2014. And he told me, since you opened that door, Erica, I would just say less is more. Sometimes with the audience you're talking to, and hopefully I'm not doing this to you all today, but hopefully with the audience you're talking to, just less is more. And you need to speak their language, especially when you're doing reports for our executive senior leadership team. And I appreciated that feedback. Again, I came a long way to being receptive to feedback. But I asked him specifically, what can I be doing, right? What communication blunders have I made and how can I be a better communicator? So I guess I was exercising number 2, tangent talking. So number 1, again, we already talked about that, but just as hard as it is when things are going a million miles a moment and everyone's got 25 things on their list, you have to know with each meeting, with each one-on-one, determining what is the level of engagement I need to have, and then figure out how to give that person in that meeting the time they deserve. And using your tools as well, going do not disturb, turning off your email, putting your phone away, right? Depending on that circumstance, and again, what that deserves. Being adaptable, I think, is absolutely everything. Recognizing that different strokes for different folks, especially when it comes to communication, the level of relationship they want to have with you. So making sure that you're understanding the people around you, understanding your stakeholders, your individuals, and asking them hey, if I've got a question, what is your communication preference? Asking some of those questions early on and understanding that is really helpful. That follow through execution piece, being proactive with everything, and then again, reacting the right way. When we initially prepared this presentation and we were thinking about this and we did some research, we discovered there's 4 types of ways you can react to something, and only one of them is going to help your relationships and help you be a better communicator. You can either completely ignore something that is, being said to you. You can be completely indifferent about it. I don't know which one of those is worse. Just having a negative reaction to what somebody says. Or the last one, and the only positive one, is having a positive reaction, some level of excitement, just a positive acknowledgement of it. So lots of things that, again, go into that communication bucket, but just if you're not sure what else you can be doing here, directly solicit feedback around it.
And there are so many things out there to help you improve your communication skills. I mean, Erica knows this about me. I did Toastmasters a long time ago with somebody that worked for me who really struggled with communication. So I told him, hey, let's go to Toastmasters together. And honestly, it was fantastic for me as well. So, it was a very safe environment to hone some of these skills that we have on this slide.
Yeah. And on that note, I've heard of clients, Apex teams that have started their own Toastmasters, either with their team, across a district, or a larger group. So again, you can combine, strategy trait number 2, that social investment, with professional development, with a focus on improving communication.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about a solution-oriented mindset on this. So I don't want to spend too much time here, but a couple of things that I want to make sure that we're taken away from this. So I think the first thing is, if you are somebody who considers yourself to be solution-oriented or is solution-oriented, how do you help others on your team have the same skills? And I think it really goes back to that idea of teach others to fish, and realizing that people learn in different ways. So are we taking the time to properly show people how to do the things, watching them do it, giving them real-time feedback in the manner that they learn best, so that they can feel empowered to do those skills and think that way on their own. So that's a big one that I really want to mention. The other thing is, especially in the environment that we're in now, just the world that we live in, we don't see people as much face to face, and we rely a lot on email, Teams, Slack, all of those collaboration tools, which are amazing, don't get me wrong. But I think sometimes we respond quickly to things when we should probably take a moment to step back and reflect on them. So, I have a coworker that that I work with that, if he is upset about something that was said in an email, he'll type up a draft email of what he really wants to say, delete it, and then write the real email. And that's his way of cooling down, right? And saying like, okay, I got that out of the way. I didn't respond and I wasn't impulsive. Now let's actually focus on a solution and working through this in an appropriate manner. So that might work for you, that might not. What I'm saying is that a lot of times we do need to take a step back. And, if that means you need to respond the next day so it isn't heated and you're coming with actual solutions, ways to solve a problem, I would highly recommend doing that versus just responding quickly and potentially complaining or saying that's not my fault, I wasn't responsible for that, etc. So, one of those things that I just highly encourage everybody to do. And if you have an opportunity to help those on your team develop this skill set, it really will help everybody as a whole.
Yeah. One of the best things an early boss did for me is any problem I brought to him, he would turn me in the habit of, all right, I want you to think about 2 possible solutions and then come back to me when you have those, no matter how bad you might think those are. And he helped teach me to fish. Good old Chris O'Hare, right? I will never, not be appreciative of him helping develop that skill in me, because I was very quick early on to be like, oh, this is happening. This is a problem I'm running into. Help me. And this is, a great opportunity to teach people how to fish or to teach yourself how to fish. And a lot of the time, and what he taught me is, your idea was really good. You just didn't believe in your own idea. You needed that confidence. And so this is kind of from both sides. So we're going to skim through the next couple. I know we're running short on time, but we've kind of addressed all of these throughout anyway. But, hands in hands with attitude, with development, is just making sure that just that complete ownership piece. And that includes the inevitable mistakes that happen. And not, being quick to jump in your own head to the world is falling, but recognizing that it's oftentimes not about the mistake, right? We hear this all the time. It's about how you react and handle the mistake. And so keeping kind of that mindset and recognizing, especially in our industry, that, mistakes are, again, inevitable, they're accepted, but what are we going to do to acknowledge it immediately and take action and really take that kind of retrospective lessons learned mentality around it? So I think we're good here, Cate, unless anything else pressing.
No, this is great. And then, I think the strong work ethic piece, and there's a really big difference between having a strong work ethic and just working all the time to work all the time. I've had managers tell me, like, I have more respect for people that can get it done in 40 hours. Like, that shows me that they are fully efficient. And yes, there are times when all of us cannot work 40 hours, right? There's deadlines, there's things that are due that we have to put in that overtime. But really, how are you making use of your time? How can you improve your overall efficiencies? That's what this is really all about. And, I'm somebody that I've worked remote for, I think 8 years now. When I used to work in an office, I thought I was really efficient until I worked from home and I realized, oh my gosh, I was distracted all of the time. Everybody works well in different environments. So there are some people that thrive on working in an office and need it, and that is where they're most efficient. Being at home is too distracting for them. I'm the opposite type of person. Like, I am the most productive, the most efficient. I am a morning person, like tried and true. Like, you hit me up at 3 or 4, it's a different story. So I tend to log on early and get things done before no one's around. so that I know I can kind of maximize my overall productivity for the day. So, I think it's being aware of what are your distractions, how can you minimize those, and what times of the day are you most productive? And sometimes that means you do need to step away from your computer. You go take a walk, you walk your dog, you go work out, drink some water, whatever it is that you need to do. But I think it's one of those things that, truly figuring out how you operate best, how you contribute the most in the least amount of time. Really, you want to be the most efficient with your time as possible.
Yeah. Awesome. So this is our last fill in the blank. Who's got it?
This one's a little trickier, but I think most people get this one. Well, like the last word's hard, but I think that the first one, it's kind of like, what is that? So Bill's just like slaying it today. He's doing really well. Bill, did you see the slide deck beforehand? No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe he did, or he's he watches Wheel of Fortune every night, plays the app. Love it. So again, quality, and we have to incorporate, the importance of both a personal quality assurance process before you give any big deliverable, any big communication, any email, any presentation, making sure that you're understanding the quality standards, not just of your organization, but best practice industry quality standards. You have your own kind of QA process. Again, Cate and I do a lot. We write a lot of reports. We do a lot of emails that we end up sending to thousands of people. So she is my ghost editor. I think you were an English major. Is that right?
No, girl, I was a math major. English is like not my specialty, but I do love correcting things. I love grammar and spelling.
Yeah. So finding somebody that has that strong suit, that can catch some of those things. And again, just that validation, that confidence before you click send. And just always thinking about, even with each presentation, it's, what can we do better? What changes can we implement, real time? I've got 3 or 4 ideas just for this presentation, right? That as we've kind of been going through it. So just kind of that constant QA mindset is huge. All right. And last but not least.
So I love this one so much. And I truly don't care who you are at the organization, how high up, how low level you are. We all have customers that we are supporting. So I have internal stakeholders. I have external stakeholders. I think customer service is just a pillar of life in general. And just like being a good person. But, I think all of us can recognize when you have an experience outside of your work life that is exceptional customer service. I know because, Erica and I, the industry we're in, there is a big component of customer service to it. I always recognize that because I think we're so ingrained to report all of the bad and the negative stuff. But if you have a really positive customer experience, how that leaves you, right? You're automatically in a better mood. So I just goes back to at the end of the day, we are all serving somebody. And so it's just making sure that you are providing that excellent customer service. You're responsive, like we talked about, approachable, kind. You have those listening skills, follow up with a resolution, that solution oriented. It all ties back together in a nice bow. But really, at the end of the day, I think being a strong professional and being a top performer, really a lot of it comes back to customer service and communication style.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it was 3 years ago, the annual CompTIA Tech Trends report on kind of skills, top 10 skills in demand. Like Cate, I'm big on customer service. Two of the teams I manage are in my realm, are focused on customer service. So always been big on this. And the reason that one of the main reasons I'm in the job I'm in is because I went above and beyond. I tried always to exceed expectations. And I love to use the phrase provide unanticipated value. I even do that in training, right? What can we do to go above and beyond and give our customers something extra that's valuable that they weren't anticipating? And so I think this is such a big one. And when CompTIA added this as into their top 10 skills in demand that managers and recruiters are looking for, that was a delight to me. And so again, as an individual, as a leader, within your organization, think about the customer service training, think about the impact, the why, and make sure this is incorporated again into continuous development for your team, into that onboarding process. Talk about the customer experience is kind of a huge buzzword right now. What customer experience we want all of our stakeholders to have? Who are our stakeholders? How can we exceed their expectations? I think this is a gap when it comes to project management, business analysis, customer service training is a gap. And it really can, again, I hate to use the term make or break, but it can do wonders for your team and the reputation for yourself and your team within your organization. So we reached the end. So we had a lot of ideas that we talked about. We hope you had our goal with any kind of discussion that we have is at least 2 ideas. Hopefully you are walking away with 2 ideas from those 15 tips. Here's kind of our top 10. And I believe, Susan, if you want to jump back in, I think they have access. So if you want to kind of revisit this and think through, like, what can I specifically apply for myself? Grab somebody else in your team, grab, your Cate of your organization. That's kind of your peer development buddy, if you will. This is definitely kind of our top 10 list.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Susan, I believe that we have some links in here. So I think, again, if I believe you make it available to everybody, we included our, all of our resources in here and some of the TED Talks we mentioned, the books. I know folks had mentioned that. And then, some links to some of the really neat things that we offer at Apex that Erica actually oversees. So, these are direct links that will take you to that information. So, if for some reason the links don't work, again, feel free to hit us up outside on LinkedIn. Susan has our emails and we can make sure that we get you this content.
Yeah. And the one thing I want to share for any, the bills of the session who are in the leadership capacity, one of my big initiatives this year has been building out hiring tips, content. Cate's helped me as well as a committee internally. So if you go to that career/career resources URL, and I can just drop that direct link into the Q&A box, but we've been building out hiring tips, how to effectively hire, onboard, retain employees. That is the #1 request that I've been getting from our client managers.
Erica and Cate, we thank you so much for your time and your great presentation today.
Of course.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.